The small town was buzzing with excitement that evening. The local community center was crowded with families, friends, and a few visitors from nearby towns, all gathered for the annual talent show. The stage was modest, with simple curtains and a few spotlights, but for the performers it felt like the most important stage in the world. The air was filled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional clinking of coffee cups from the concession stand. People were eager to see the familiar faces from their town and some daring newcomers who promised to entertain them among the performers. Waiting backstage was a young woman who looked completely out of place. She was dressed simply in a plain shirt and jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She clutched a folder with her sheet music so tightly that her knuckles were white. Unlike the other contestants who wore sparkling outfits and had rehearsed complex dance moves, she had nothing flashy to show. She didn't have a microphone technician hovering behind her, nor a flashy stage entrance planned. What she had was a voice and a heart full of hope, and the courage to step onto a stage where everyone could see her. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her folder. She had spent years singing quietly at home in her bedroom, and sometimes at her job during slow hours at the local grocery store. Music had always been her escape. When she sang, the world around her faded, and for a few minutes she felt free from worries, from judgment, from the constant weight of feeling invisible. But she had never imagined sharing her singing in front of a crowd this big. The thought of hundreds of eyes on her made her stomach twist. Her heart raced as she took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that made her hands shake. Back in the audience, people were chatting excitedly about the next act. A few teenagers nudged each other, giggling as they looked at the plain-looking girl backstage. "She doesn't look like she can sing," one whispered, smirking. "Maybe she just embarrassed herself," another added with a snicker. Their laughter was quiet at first, but it spread quickly through their small group. Soon, some others joined in, whispering and pointing. It wasn't mean-spirited cruelty. It was the kind of casual judgment that often comes when someone doesn't fit the usual image of a performer. But for the young woman waiting in the wings, it felt heavy, like a cloud of doubt pressing down on her chest. The host called her name, announcing her turn with the usual cheerful energy. "Please welcome our next performer," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. All eyes turned toward the stage. She swallowed hard and forced herself to walk forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The laughter and whispers from the audience reached her ears, making her cheeks burn. She felt her confidence wobble like a fragile candle flame in the wind. A voice inside her screamed to run away, to hide behind the safety of her ordinary life. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, told her to stay. It said, "This is your moment. Sing, and let them hear your truth." As she reached the microphone, she paused for a moment, looking out at the crowd. Faces blurred together under the bright lights. Some were still smiling, some curious, some doubtful. She could hear a few chuckles here and there, small but sharp. She felt the weight of every eye, every expectation or lack of it. Her knees felt weak, but she squared her shoulders and took another deep breath. She opened her folder and looked at the first note. It seemed simple, yet at that moment it was the most important thing in the world. Then she began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, almost timid, barely carrying beyond the first few rows of the audience. A few people leaned back, still smirking, unconvinced that anything remarkable could come from someone so unassuming. Her heart pounded, but she kept going, letting the music flow through her, letting each word and note come from the deepest part of herself. It wasn't about hitting every pitch perfectly. It was about telling a story, letting her emotions speak louder than nerves or judgment. At first, the laughter in the audience didn't fade. A few teenagers whispered and giggled, thinking this would be another forgettable act. But slowly, very slowly, the sound of her voice began to ripple through the hall in a way no one expected. There was an honesty in it that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't performing for applause or approval. She was singing because she had to, because the song was part of her story, part of her soul. Some of the audience members shifted in their seats, surprised by the depth of feeling in her voice. Older attendees who had initially been chatting and distracted began to lean forward, listening more intently. Parents exchanged glances, realizing that this was no ordinary performance. There was something fragile yet powerful about the way she sang, a rawness that didn't come from polish or training but from life experience itself, backstage. A few other contestants were watching from the wings. They had been confident, expecting to be the ones everyone remembered, but now they looked at her with a mix of astonishment and respect. None of them had expected the quiet, plain-looking girl to have such a gift. It wasn't just her voice. It was the honesty, the courage, the vulnerability that poured from her with every note. As the song continued, her nerves began to melt away, replaced by a strange, empowering feeling. She felt the connection forming between her and the audience, a thread woven through music and emotion. Every note she sang seemed to reach someone, even if they didn't know exactly why. She sang not to impress, not to compete, but to share herself. And slowly, the laughter that had once filled the room disappeared. The whispers stopped. The smirks faded into curiosity, then surprise, then quiet admiration. She reached the end of the first verse and paused, letting a single note hang in the air. There was a moment of silence, so profound it seemed to fill the entire hall. Every eye was on her, but instead of feeling fear, she felt a strange calm. It was as if the audience had stopped being a crowd and had become a mirror, reflecting back the courage she hadn't realized she possessed. She smiled faintly, not because she had won them over yet, but because she had found the strength to show up, to be herself, fully and completely. The first part of her performance ended, but the impact had already begun. The audience was silent, caught off guard by the depth and emotion they hadn't expected. Some people were blinking rapidly as if trying to hold back tears. Others sat motionless, absorbing the unexpected gift of a voice that spoke directly to their hearts. In that moment, she realized something important. It wasn't about how people saw her on the outside. It was about the truth she carried within, the story she had the courage to share. Backstage, she exhaled slowly, her hands no longer trembling as much. She had faced the hardest part, the first step, the first note, and she had survived. More than that, she had begun to reach people in a way she had only dreamed of. The rest of the song still awaited her, but for the first time, she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. She was no longer just a nervous young woman on a stage. She was a storyteller, a voice that demanded to be heard, even in the face of doubt and laughter. And as the audience settled into an attentive silence, waiting for the next note, a subtle shift began to happen. What had started as ridicule, as laughter and disbelief, began to transform. Eyes softened. Hearts opened. People leaned forward, drawn in by something intangible, something real. In that small, ordinary town, on that modest stage, a young woman was about to show everyone that courage, honesty, and a true voice could change everything. The young woman stood on the stage, taking a brief pause after the first few notes. Her heart was still pounding, but the silence that followed her opening verse gave her a strange, new kind of courage. The laughter and whispers from the audience had faded, replaced by curiosity. She could feel the energy in the room shifting, like the air itself was waiting for her next move. She clutched her sheet music a little less tightly now, and for the first time, she allowed herself to focus completely on the music instead of the crowd. She began to sing again, this time more steadily. Her voice was soft but filled with a warmth that resonated in the hearts of the audience. Every note she sang seemed to carry a piece of her story or struggles, her fears, her quiet dreams that had remained hidden for so long. She had chosen this song because it was deeply personal, a melody that reflected the moments she had faced alone, the times when she had felt small and unseen. And now, as her voice carried through the room, those hidden moments were shared with everyone present. Some of the audience members shifted in their seats, sensing the sincerity in her performance. The teenagers who had whispered and laughed at her earlier found themselves silent, leaning forward to listen. They had expected an ordinary act, but what they heard was far from ordinary. It wasn't just the technical quality of her singing that impressed them. It was the honesty, the raw emotion that poured from her as naturally as breathing. A few people exchanged surprised glances, as if silently acknowledging, "She's really something special." The young woman could feel her own nerves easing with each passing measure. She had worried about every detail, whether her voice was strong enough, whether she would stumble over a note, but now none that mattered. She was no longer performing for approval. She was performing because she had to, because the song was part of her. And in that moment, the stage no longer felt intimidating. It felt like a space where she could truly be herself, where her heart could speak louder than her doubts. As she reached the chorus, her voice rose in strength and clarity. She let the emotion swell, letting the highs and lows of the melody reflect the story she was telling. Her hands, which had been trembling earlier, now moved naturally, gesturing with the rhythm of the song. The audience, initially hesitant, was now leaning forward, caught in the pull of her voice. The room that had once been filled with laughter and chatter was now quiet. Each person focused on the young woman standing alone on the stage. Sharing something profoundly human. She could see the subtle reactions around her. A mother in the front row had her hand over her mouth, holding back tears. An elderly man had his eyes closed, as if the music was taking him somewhere he had not been in years. A young girl sitting with her friends clutched her mother's arm, her wide eyes reflecting awe and wonder. Every note she sang was reaching them, touching places that words alone could not. The young woman realized that music had a power she had only ever imagined, a power to connect, to heal, to change the mood of a room in ways that nothing else could, despite the growing connection. There was a moment when doubt crept back into her mind. She noticed one man in the back row who still looked skeptical, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. She wondered if he would dismiss her performance entirely. But instead of faltering, she took a steadying breath and let the doubt fuel her. She poured more of herself into the next few lines, allowing her voice to convey every ounce of vulnerability she had been holding back. And slowly, even that last skeptic began to soften. Leaning forward as if drawn into the story she was telling, her voice shifted with subtle nuances, carrying the weight of every quiet struggle she had endured. There were moments of fragility where her tone was almost a whisper, followed by surges of strength that surprised even her. She realized that this song was more than just notes and lyrics. It was a reflection of her life, a piece of herself that had waited for the right moment to be shared. And as the audience listened, she felt a remarkable truth. By being honest, by showing her heart without pretense, she could reach people in ways she had never imagined. Around the room, the atmosphere was changing. People who had been distracted by their phones, talking quietly, or fidgeting in their seats were now entirely present. The laughter had vanished completely, replaced by quiet attention and a growing sense of awe. The young woman could sense the shift. The audience was no longer watching a timid, unsure performer. They were witnessing someone who had the courage to bare her soul through music. It was a rare, almost magical transformation, one that left everyone in the room holding their breath, waiting for the next note. The song carried on, weaving a story of hope, loss, and resilience. She sang about moments of loneliness, times when she had felt invisible, and the quiet strength she found within herself to keep going. She didn't exaggerate or embellish. She simply sang the truth as she had lived it. And in doing so, she began to see something remarkable happening. People were not just listening, they were feeling. Her music had created a bridge between her world and theirs, a shared space where emotions flowed freely. Unspoken yet deeply understood, the young woman noticed the subtle details of the audience's reaction. An older woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, quietly moved by the sincerity of the performance. A father gently held his child's hand, guiding her to sit still and listen. Teenagers who had been restless now sat with rapt attention, their eyes wide and unblinking. The young woman felt a wave of warmth in her chest, a quiet validation that all the years of singing in solitude, all the moments of self-doubt had led to this. She realized that the true reward wasn't applause or recognition, it was the connection she had made. The way her honesty had touched the hearts of others. As the song approached its middle section, she allowed herself to fully immerse in the music. Her voice rose and fell, matching the natural rhythm of the story she was telling. She didn't worry about making mistakes. Instead, she let the song guide her, letting the emotions dictate every note. The audience was completely absorbed. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others leaned forward, captivated by the raw beauty of what they were hearing. The energy in the room was tangible, a shared experience that bound everyone together, even those who had doubted her moments earlier. With every verse, she felt her confidence grow. She realized that the laughter she had feared so much had lost its power over her. What mattered now was the story she was telling, the emotions she was sharing, and the connection she had formed with the people who had come to watch her. For the first time, she felt free, not free from fear entirely, but free to be herself, to let her voice carry her truth without reservation. And as she sang, she noticed the audience leaning in, as if drawn by an invisible force. Each person touched in a unique and personal way. The young woman's performance was no longer just a song. It was a dialogue. She gave a piece of herself, and in return she received the attention, empathy, and understanding of those around her. Every note was a step closer to breaking the barrier between performer and audience, transforming the hall into a shared space of emotion. She could feel the change not only in them but in herself. The nervous, timid girl who had walked onto the stage moments ago was becoming someone stronger. Someone who believed in her own voice and the power it held. As the middle section of the song drew to a close, she paused for a brief moment, letting a single, sustained note fill the room. The audience held its breath, hanging on every sound. There was a quiet reverence in the air, a collective recognition that something extraordinary was happening. The young woman smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had crossed the first real hurdle, the skepticism, the laughter, the doubt, and in its place, she had found attention, respect, and a shared emotional experience that no one could take away. When she began the final lines of this section, her voice was steady, clear, and infused with confidence. She sang with an intensity and sincerity that captivated every listener. By now, there was no trace of mockery or doubt among the audience. The people who had laughed at her appearance moments before were leaning forward, completely absorbed, their earlier judgments replaced with admiration and wonder. She had done more than just perform a song. She had changed the energy in the room, shifted the hearts of those watching, and, in the process, discovered the strength that had always been within her. By the end of this part of her performance, it was clear that the young woman had captivated everyone. The laughter that had greeted her at the beginning was gone, replaced by a profound respect and a sense of connection. She had begun to prove that talent isn't just about appearances or showmanship, it's about heart, authenticity, and the courage to share one's truth. And as she paused for a brief breath before the next section, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had begun to touch lives in a way she had only ever dreamed of. The young woman stood on the stage, feeling a wave of calm wash over her. The initial fear that had gripped her when she first stepped into the bright lights had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence. She knew that what she was about to do next was the heart of the performance, the part where her emotions and story would meet the hearts of the audience. The room was silent now, every person waiting, anticipating, drawn into the vulnerability she carried with her voice. She began the next verse, letting her voice rise with the melody. Each note seemed to carry the weight of everything she had ever felt, the moments of doubt, the quiet struggles, and the small victories that had kept her going. She remembered the long nights alone in her small apartment, singing to herself because no one else was there to hear. She remembered the days at work when she had felt invisible, stocking shelves, ringing up customers, quietly humming to herself to stay sane. And now, all of that, the fear, the hope, the persistence, was pouring out of her in the only way she knew how. As she sang, the audience began to lean forward, caught completely off guard by the depth of her emotion. The laughter that had greeted her at the beginning of the night was long gone. Even the most skeptical faces were now quiet, their attention fully captured. Some people's eyes glistened with unshed tears. A few clutched their hands together, almost holding on to the moment as if it were fragile and fleeting. The young woman realized that the connection she felt with the audience was powerful. For the first time, she understood that music could do more than entertain. It could reach into hearts, touch hidden feelings, and even change perceptions. She could feel the energy in the room shifting. People who had been restless moments ago were now still, as if the world outside had ceased to exist. Each person in the audience was living the story she was telling through her song, experiencing the highs and lows, the fear and the hope along with her. The teenagers who had whispered and laughed earlier were now silent, their expressions showing surprise and admiration. Some even looked embarrassed that they had doubted her so quickly. She didn't judge them. She understood that people often judged too soon, but she also knew that she had the power to change their minds through honesty and courage. As the chorus approached, she let her voice grow stronger, yet soft enough to carry emotion. She leaned into the words, allowing each syllable to be felt, not just heard. Her hands moved naturally with the music, as if the rhythm had a life of its own. The audience seemed to hang on her every movement, every sound, completely absorbed. There was a moment when she noticed an older man in the middle row with tears streaming down his face. She did not falter. Instead, she sang even more from the heart. She knew that her song was reaching people in ways she had never imagined, touching the parts of them they often kept hidden. The young woman could feel herself becoming one with the music. She had sung countless times alone, but this was different. This was not about practice or perfection, it was about truth. She had a story to tell, and for the first time, she had an audience willing to hear it fully. She didn't hold back. Every note carried emotion, every pause carried meaning, and every gesture spoke louder than words. The audience was no longer a crowd, they were witnesses, participants in her moment of vulnerability and courage. Her voice grew more confident, soaring as she reached the climax of the song. She had waited for this moment all her life, the chance to show the world that she had a voice worth hearing, a heart worth noticing. And now, standing on the stage, she poured everything into her performance. The melody rose and fell like waves, mirroring the emotional journey she had been on for years. She felt tears prick her own eyes, but she didn't stop. She let the emotion flow, letting the audience feel it too. The audience reacted in ways she had only dreamed of. There were people wiping their eyes, some holding hands over their hearts, and a few silently nodding, deeply moved. Even those who had been skeptical before now had expressions of admiration, their earlier doubts replaced with awe. She noticed a young girl looking at her with wide eyes, almost as if she were seeing a hero for the first time. That moment made her realize the impact of what she was doing, not just the applause or recognition, but the ability to inspire, to touch, and to move. Her confidence soared as she continued. She felt the connection with the audience grow stronger with each note. She could sense that they were not just listening, they were experiencing the song with her. She felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling that she had never felt before. It was a combination of relief, joy, and pride. Relief that she had survived the initial fear. Joy that she was connecting with the audience. And pride that she was finally showing her true self to the world. The young woman's voice carried the story of resilience and hope. She sang about overcoming challenges, about finding strength in quiet moments, and about never giving up even when the world seemed to ignore her. Her voice was no longer timid or unsure, it was full of courage, full of life, and full of emotion. The audience was completely captivated. Every person in the room seemed to be holding their breath, fully invested in her performance. It was as if time had stopped, leaving only her voice, her story, and the hearts of the people listening. She noticed subtle gestures in the audience that told her performance was working. A man in the front row had a hand on his chest, eyes glistening. A woman behind him had her hand over her mouth, silently moved. Even the teenagers who had mocked her were now sitting upright, leaning forward, completely focused. She realized that she had changed their perception, not just of her, but of what it meant to be brave, authentic, and real in front of others. As she reached the peak of the song, she poured everything into the final lines of this section. Her voice soared, carrying every ounce of emotion, every fragment of her story, and every hope she had ever held. She could feel the intensity of the moment, the electricity in the room, and the silent awe of the audience. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. She was no longer just singing. She was connecting, inspiring, and leaving a mark on everyone present. The audience was completely entranced. No one was moving, no one was whispering, no one was laughing. Every eye was on her, every heart was listening, and every soul seemed to resonate with the honesty of her performance. The laughter that had greeted her earlier in the night was long gone, replaced by awe, admiration, and deep respect. The young woman realized that she had done something extraordinary, not because she had a perfect voice, but because she had the courage to be herself, fully and completely, in front of everyone. As the last few notes of this section flowed from her lips, she could see the audience's faces transformed. People were leaning back, taking in the moment, some wiping tears, some smiling, some simply staring in quiet amazement. The energy in the room was electric, charged with emotion and connection. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never felt before. For the first time, she truly understood that the heart of any performance was not perfection, but authenticity, and that courage and honesty could move people in ways that talent alone sometimes could not. When she finished this part of the song, she paused, letting the silence linger. It was a silence full of emotion, a silence that spoke louder than applause. The audience sat in stunned quiet, processing what they had just witnessed. And in that silence, the young woman felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fears, sung her truth, and touched the hearts of hundreds of people in ways she had only dreamed of. She smiled softly, knowing that this was a turning point not just in the performance, but in her life. For the first time, she realized that she could do this. She could stand on a stage, bare her soul, and be accepted and appreciated for who she truly was. The fear that had held her back for so long was fading, replaced by confidence and hope. She knew that the rest of the song would continue to carry her and the audience on this emotional journey. But she also knew that she had already changed something. She had transformed doubt into admiration, laughter into silence, and skepticism into awe. In that moment, the young woman understood the true power of music. It was not just sound. It was a bridge between people, a language of the heart, a way to communicate the deepest truths when words alone were not enough. She had found her voice, not just in sound, but in courage, authenticity, and connection. And as she prepared to continue the performance, she felt an unwavering determination to give everything she had, to finish the song with all the passion, honesty, and emotion she could possibly muster. The young woman took a deep breath as she approached the final part of her performance. The first 3 sections had been a journey, both for her and the audience. She had faced the fear, captured attention, and reached the hearts of everyone present. Now it was time to bring everything together, to finish her song with the same honesty and courage that had carried her this far. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves, but it was different this time. This was no longer fear of judgment. It was the thrill of sharing something deeply personal and knowing it was being understood. She began the last section, letting her voice soar naturally. This part of the song was the culmination of the story she had been telling, a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. She sang about moments when life felt overwhelming, when it seemed like no one was watching or caring, and about the small, quiet victories that had kept her moving forward. Her voice carried each word with sincerity, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel fully, to let the emotions pour out completely. The audience was captivated. Every eye was on her, every person holding their breath, listening to her every note. Some leaned forward, others closed their eyes, letting the music and emotions wash over them. The young woman noticed subtle signs of admiration and awe everywhere she looked. People who had laughed at her earlier were now sitting in stunned silence, their expressions showing disbelief at how completely she had transformed their perception in such a short time. She smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of their attention and the power of her honesty. As she continued, her voice grew stronger, more confident. She didn't rush, she didn't overthink, she simply allowed herself to flow with the music. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her heart to the audience, and each person responded in kind. She saw a mother holding her child close, tears quietly streaming down her face. An elderly man had his hand over his chest, a soft smile spreading across his lips as he listened. Teenagers who had mocked her now sat upright, completely absorbed, their eyes wide with awe. She realized that this was more than a performance, it was a shared human experience, one that connected her to everyone in the room in a way she had never imagined. The young woman's confidence grew with every passing moment. She felt as if the stage had become a space of trust, a bridge between her story and the audience's hearts. Her hands moved gently with the music, emphasizing the emotions in the song, and her face reflected the depth of her feelings. She didn't need applause yet. She didn't need approval. She needed only to sing truthfully, to continue telling her story with courage and honesty. And in doing so, she could see the power of authenticity at work. As she reached the climax of the song, her voice soared higher than before, full of raw emotion and passion. She sang about hope, about the strength found in quiet perseverance, about the small acts of courage that often go unnoticed but shape a person's life. Her voice trembled slightly at times, not from fear but from the intensity of the emotions she was sharing. The audience was silent, hanging on every note, every word. It was a rare and beautiful moment, one where hearts were fully open, and people were fully present. The young woman noticed subtle reactions in the audience that filled her with warmth and pride. A woman in the front row had her hands clasped tightly, her lips moving as if she were mouthing the words along with the song. A man in the back wiped tears from his eyes quietly, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. A child held tightly to a parent, their eyes wide and sparkling with admiration. Even those who had been skeptical before were now completely absorbed, leaning forward, their faces reflecting awe and wonder. She realized that she had changed their perception not through showmanship or perfection, but through the honesty and courage she had brought to the stage. As the final lines of the song approached, the young woman poured everything into her voice. She let the music carry her fully, letting the notes rise and fall naturally, allowing the emotions to flow freely. She felt a wave of liberation and empowerment, knowing that she had shared her story fully and authentically. She didn't hold back. Every note was an expression of her heart, every pause a reflection of her journey. She felt the energy in the room, the connection with the audience, and she knew that this moment would stay with them long after the song ended. The room was completely silent as she finished the last note, letting it linger in the air. There was no sound, no movement, just the weight of emotion hanging over everyone. The young woman opened her eyes and looked at the audience. She could see the stunned expressions, the wide eyes, the quiet smiles, and the few tears. She felt a rush of pride and relief, knowing that she had done what she had come to do. She had faced her fears, sung her truth, and reached people's hearts in a way she had never imagined. Then slowly, the silence broke. It started with a soft clap from one person in the audience, then another, until the entire room erupted into applause. People stood, some cheering, some whistling, some clapping with tears in their eyes. The young woman felt her chest swell with emotion as the sound washed over her. She had never experienced anything like it. The applause was not just for her singing, it was for her courage, her honesty, her willingness to be vulnerable in front of hundreds of people. She had taken a risk, and the reward was beyond what she had ever imagined. The judges, who had been watching intently, rose to their feet as well, clapping enthusiastically. One of them called out words of praise, highlighting her emotion, her authenticity, and the impact of her performance. She felt a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that she had given her all and that it had been recognized in the most meaningful way. The audience continued to cheer, some even chanting her name softly, as if to honor not just the song, but the person behind it. As the applause continued, the young woman took a step back from the microphone, letting the moment sink in. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her body was tired from standing and singing with so much emotion, but her heart was full. She realized that this was a turning point not just in her life, but in how she saw herself. For years, she had doubted her abilities, worried that no one would care, worried that her voice and story didn't matter. But in this moment, she understood that courage, authenticity, and honesty could move people in ways that went far beyond talent alone. Backstage, other performers and staff were watching her in awe. They had seen many acts over the years, but few had the power to transform an audience like she had. Some came forward, offering congratulations, their eyes shining with genuine admiration. The young woman felt a warm sense of belonging, of recognition, and of accomplishment. She had stepped onto the stage as a nervous, timid performer, and she was leaving it as someone who had touched hearts and inspired others. As she left the stage, she heard people in the audience whispering about her performance, sharing how moved they had been. Some were discussing how brave she had been, how honest and real she had appeared. Others were talking about how her voice had touched them personally, bringing memories and emotions to the surface. She realized that she had not only performed a song, but she had shared a part of herself. And that sharing had created a ripple effect that reached far beyond the stage. That night, after the talent show ended, she walked home with a lightness in her step. She thought about what had happened, the fear she had faced, the courage she had found, the way she had connected with the audience. She realized that the experience had changed her. She no longer doubted herself as she had before. She had learned that being authentic, being brave, and being willing to share your truth could open doors that she had never imagined. In the days and weeks that followed, the impact of her performance continued to grow. People in her town spoke about her courage and her talent, and local media even covered the story, highlighting her journey and the emotional performance that had captivated the audience. Opportunities began to appear, invites to perform at events, small recording sessions, and chances to share her story more widely. But more importantly, she carried with her a new sense of confidence, knowing that she had faced her fear, embraced her truth, and made a lasting impression on the hearts of those who had watched. The young woman learned something that would stay with her forever. Talent alone is not enough to touch people's hearts. What matters most is honesty, authenticity, and the courage to share a piece of yourself with the world. When she sang that night, she had given a part of her heart to everyone in the audience. And in return, she had received something priceless: recognition, respect, and a profound sense of self-belief. And so, what had begun as a night filled with fear, doubt, and laughter ended as a night of triumph, connection, and transformation. The young woman had shown that even in the face of skepticism, mockery, and fear, courage and honesty could shine through and change everything. Her performance was not just a song, it was a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary people, in the simplest moments, can achieve something truly extraordinary.